All right, hey everybody. Welcome to my little panel session. We're going to do one on Shucking the Myths, why Southern oysters deserve your plate. So I know that this is a bunch of Oyster South people and all of us love Southern oysters, but I'm Extension, so I always feel like I have to start my talk with a question. So how many people have heard of the myths? There's between 6 that we have. So who has heard the R myth? Who has heard that oysters are not from the South are not as tasty? They're not as pretty. They are low quality. Okay, good. I see a lot of hands. We're here to shuck that myth, okay? The Southern oysters are amazing. And so we've got a great panel here to tell you all about it. So hopefully I pushed the right button. Where do I point it at? There we go. So here's my panel. We've got Lindsay Allday right here. Then we got Brandon Smith. We've got Bryan Rackley. We've got Rutvik Patel. And then we have Chef Julia Sullivan all the way at the end. I've chosen my panel to represent different aspects of the oyster world. We've got an old distributor shucker, a farmer, a restaurateur, a mother shucker, amazing king shucker, and then an amazing chef up in Nashville that has brought the Southern oysters to her farm. So let's just go ahead and get started. So there's the myths. So these are the myths that we are going to be covering today, and then hopefully we can get our panelists to talk about the myths a little bit more. So the first myth, which I think our farmers and restaurateurs are going to be able to talk about, is the myth number 1, that Southern oysters are unsafe to eat raw, which if that was the case, I think we'd all be sick by now. And then myth number 2, the dreaded R-list months are definitely a no-go. So Brandon, if you want to take it over for why you think that they're safe and the R months are good to go now.
Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah.
He's also my Sea Grant County agent, so thanks for picking on me first. Well, are oysters unsafe to eat during the R months? That is not necessarily true, and you can tell everybody that, but that is an old tale that everybody believes. I think it is important to educate the customers that we have in Florida. We have a Vibrio protocol. This is the example that you see up on the screen right now, where in the summertime you see that the harvesting has to be completed at the processor and in the cooler by 11 a.m. Also, we have rapid cooling, which means that the oysters have to come below 50 degrees within 2 hours, and all these are all temped and all the records, and we're inspected every quarter. So we take it very, very seriously. Our priority is keeping customers safe.
And I will add 2 of my favorite things to say about this is that during the summer, we actually have 2 R's. Refrigeration and regulations. Those are our 2 R's. Those are the ones that keep us safe throughout the summer. Bryan, do you see any difference during the summer with sales? Do you notice that people have that little bit of a myth that they don't want to eat an oyster during the R, and how do you address that to them?
We've been addressing that for over a decade now, and you're gonna supply some people with some information that's gonna disarm them. They'll feel a little bit more comfortable about it. I mean, if you look at our sales trends, and Julia may be able to tell you something similar, we sell more oysters in the summer than we do in the seasons when they're the most appropriate. And I think that's just because people's tendencies are to crave cold food in the summer. But yeah, I mean, I think that we've done a good job of explaining the process, especially because, we have a farm as well. I mean, I can confidently tell my staff that if we're trying to push Shiny Dimes in July, that those oysters got from the farm to a refrigerator pretty damn fast. Also, I mean, what would you rather have? What do you feel more risk in regard? I mean, you're going to eat a bunch of old mayonnaise that's been sitting out on July 4th all day. Wouldn't you feel safer just having some ice cold oysters? So I don't know. I've looked at some data, and we do have to answer the question. I do feel like, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but a lot of that is typically coming from an older demographic, and they are kind of slowly dying out anyways. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a challenge that we've embraced, and we still have to answer the question, but it does not hurt our sales.
That's awesome. Julie, are you seeing the same thing up in Nashville? I know that you're like, I mean, he's landlocked, but you're like really landlocked. So I bet you the
Hello? Okay. So, yeah, I think that's true. We sell more in the summer as well, I think for the same reason. We do have people that ask. We do a staff training about every quarter just to make sure people are refreshed on the information, and we're covering any new staff that has come in. And this is one of the things that we talk about is, what do you say if somebody asks you this question? And we address the same thing that you just talked about, and also emphasize that we're selling farm-raised oysters, so for the most point, they're not spawning. They're not going to be in a spawning season, which I think is another reason for that myth. At least that's what I've heard. And most of the time, they're willing to let it go, because if they've decided to eat at an oyster bar in Nashville, like, they're probably just being contentious, right? But I always tell them, if they don't want to listen to you, if they don't want to eat them, that's okay. Don't try to force anything down anybody's throat.
Yeah, and that's the one big thing is, you don't want to force it. Giving good education is definitely the biggest key. Having them educated on what they're doing and about to eat is really massive, what I found. So I think we have shucked those two myths. Don't you all think we've shucked those myths pretty well? Okay, we're going to go ahead and break that. So myth number 3, cold water oysters are better quality and safer. How many people have heard that one? Okay. I just have 2 little articles that I put off to the side there. You don't have to read them. But you can see where that was taking place, where there were some issues that they had up in the Northeast. I cautiously have been looking on the internet for any cases of southern oysters that have caused a big breakout like that, say at the Apalachicola Oyster Fest or something like that. I haven't heard, I didn't see anything. Has anybody heard of that? Question, raise hands if you're, okay, good. All right, love to see that. So I put this up there just because that was one of the biggest myths that I actually heard, is that cold water oysters are better quality and safer. So does anybody want to take on this? This could be a restaurateur, this could be a shucker. I know, Rutvik, you live in the north, so you might have a little bit more experience with these northern oysters. So maybe this is where you might come in and say what you see from a southern oyster and a northern oyster.
The extra caution being taken at the PEI Shellfish Festival, the oysters had nothing to do with it, right? I don't know why oysters get picked on everywhere in the south and up north. Whenever something goes wrong, first fault oysters, right? So that was a person, not oysters. Beyond that, I think oysters are a seasonal thing. So when we say these oysters are better or these oysters are worse, I don't think that's a solid line there. I think it's which season are you eating the oysters, where are you eating them, and that matters so much. Right now, all I want is Gulf oysters up north. I want them, but I can't get them. So I use however far south I can go, and I use those oysters because they're amazing right now. Yeah. And when the summertime comes, I'll start going up north through colder water. So it's just a seasonal thing, and educating people the right way, talking about the oysters the right way, making sure, letting people understand what they're eating, where they're eating it from, and why it tastes the way it tastes is very important. And who's the person doing that should be educated enough to know about the oysters and talk about it like that. So, yeah.
Perfect. So, is that a northern oyster or a southern oyster I have displayed up there?
That's a southern oyster.
That's a southern oyster. I think that's a beautiful oyster right there. Great quality, and I'm not going to say they're safer, but thank you for busting that myth. We're going to break that one out. See you later. So myth number 4 and myth number 5, which is another one that I hear a bunch, is southern oysters are big and ugly, and they also taste dirty. A lot of people, for me, what I realize is that they think of a southern oyster, they think of like a wild-caught bottom oyster that's like this big, and it takes like 3 crackers to put on it. So when they hear of a southern oyster, that's immediately what they think. However, we're trying to change that. We've got some beautiful oysters displayed there. Besides NC Oyster Company does look kind of big. That's a divine pine. I know they're not that big. But you can see he's got 3 oysters that fit in his hand. So this is a good one for the shuckers because they are the ones that will be holding the oysters, getting it ready for you to present and make it look as pretty as that NC Oyster Company and that one up top. So, Lindsay, will you debunk the myth that Southern oysters are big, ugly, and taste dirty?
Yeah, I think so much of that has to do with so many people still haven't met a Gulf cultivated oyster. Like almost every raw bar that I work, people come up and they think that they're a northeastern oyster. And I get to share with them, no, this is what a Gulf cultivated oyster looks like. And people think that our water quality is not good because they can't see through it. And they don't necessarily understand that that's food for the oyster to grow faster and have more fat and be more delicious.
Correct. Yeah, people love to come to Florida and they see that crystal clear water and they're like, hey, where's that? We don't have it. And I'm like, well, if it's crystal clear, the oysters wouldn't have anything to eat. So thank you for that. Rutvik, do you think Southern oysters are big, ugly, and taste dirty compared to Northern oysters?
3 years ago, that's what I thought. And then my friend Dan, the seafood dude, did me the honor of inviting me down south to Texas and showing what was going on here. I had Matagorda Pearls, Lone Stars, Blackjacks, and Oyster Bros for the first time, and blew my mind, changed everything that I thought about Southern oysters, the Gulf oysters. And since then, it has been a mission of mine to up north, every time someone says ew about Gulf oysters, I am there. I am there saying, nope, you don't know what you're talking about. Look at this. So, yeah.
So I'm going to go to Brandon next. He has something to say. What you got?
I do. Even last night, I was shucking some oysters last night at Navy Blue. I had somebody who came up, him and his wife from Oregon, who never had a cultivated Gulf oyster, and they were absolutely blown away. He thought that they were delicious. I also met another gentleman who said that our oysters he's eaten oysters all over the world, and they were definitely in his top 5. And then I met another gentleman last night. I think he's a new farmer, and he's used to the Louisiana wild large oysters, and seeing the cultivated oysters that we brought last night were both. We brought our petite and our normal title guide, and he was also really blown away by just like the shape, the quality, and just the appearance of the shell. So those kind of things right there, just last night, those 3 people, from all over the place, had an experience, a positive experience. I think, Thomas, you helped me shuck last night. You heard a lot of just positive things. And, that's the thing we have to do is we have to get out there, be uncomfortable because we are oyster farmers. We don't like to necessarily want to be on stage. We don't necessarily want to put ourselves out there. We'd rather be on the boat, just quiet, doing what we do, getting muddy and dirty and stinky and going home. But how do we grow the industry? We got to have people who are positive about the industry like Rutvik and Lindsay. We have to have the people who trust the source and who can also further that story because they are the very end of our story, right? Mm-hmm. We start the story, they finish the story. So, if a person's going to have a positive experience, it has to be carried all the way through, right? So you need to have a beautiful shuck. It can't be scrambled eggs, so those things about big, ugly, dirty, tasting bad. If somebody has a bad shuck at a restaurant, it's going to impact what those people feel about that oyster. So, and these folks, they're just as passionate as we are as farmers.
Yeah, you're kind of digging into, I think, what Lindsay was going to talk about, so it's perfect. So I also wanted to hear from Julie and Bryan on the customers. How do you ever hear them send oysters back from Southern Oysters saying, man, these are too big, these are too dirty? Because, a lot of people will send back oysters in where I live. So do y'all get any of that?
No.
See? Okay.
Yeah, we don't either. The thing I think that we see is Nashville is such a transient place. We have so much tourism and we have people from all over. And so on our list, we have oysters from all 3 coasts. And we just really train our servers to kind of coach the table through that conversation. What I find is there are people who are from the Pacific Northwest or from the Northeast who are pretty unwilling to try something different. Sometimes we get them to and they love it. And then there's other people who come in who are really open and they're surprised how wonderful everything is. I think, if you grow up in Nashville or Atlanta, typically you grew up going to 30A when, to go to the beach. And so you grew up eating those kind of big, flabby, dirty oysters. And people, so even Southerners, I think, are really surprised when they come in and you really coach them through the experience and tell them the difference between what that is versus what we have available now. But there are people, again, who are just going to be unwilling, and so that's why we offer something for everybody.
Yeah, if you don't mind me adding on.
Yeah.
So at Kimball House, we do sell Gulf and South Atlantic oysters, but we have also, since the beginning, sold oysters from the Northeast and the Northwest. And the point of that, and what has been super fun and rewarding for me, especially as we grew into relationships and access to culture Gulf stuff, is that you could go to essentially all four corners of the continental U.S. and try oysters and sort of just like pick your own pleasure adventure, and that's part of the dialogue, it's part of the experience, it's part of the relationship between our servers and our guests, is to find out what they like. And I think that it's fun for them and it's fun for us to kind of be on that trip with them to see what works for them. And the feedback is always awesome. You don't win everybody, but there's a ton of people now that have gotten used to eating oysters at maybe 20 parts per thousand as opposed to 32, and now that's their preference because that's what they have access to.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think that people's opinions are super subjective and they change all the time, but I think that bars like ours give people an opportunity to try stuff from different places. And when I glance at these questions, I mentioned this to you the other day, and I can pull similar data from like other quarters of a year, but I look specifically at July 1st through September 31st because I wanted to know what was working best during hot months, and I wanted to see how the Gulf and the South Atlantic held up. I don't think that Shiny Dimes are a fair, it's not fair to really include them because the staff, we grow them so that,
You can include them.
you get it. But the following 6 to 8 appellations that were leading in sales, they were only separated by 100 pieces or so. And this is over a course of 3 months. So they're really clustered together. And out of those 6, 50% of them were from the South. And they weren't all the same oysters because, we ran out of Shiny Dimes in August, but then Chino and started bringing his Tybes in mid-November. So, we see things fall off and other things pick up, but we still have 3 to 5 appellations that are from the Gulf and South Atlantic that are super competitive with everything else, if not like beating out a lot of like well-known, historically reputable farms in the Northeast and Northwest.
Yeah. Kimball House was the first place I went to that I had a wheel of oysters from all around the United States, and that was one of the coolest experiences I've had. If you've never done that before, there's other places, but Kimball House is a great place to do it up in Atlanta. Thank you for that. Anything else we want to add? We got one more myth. Yeah, Julia.
I just wanted to add too that we actually have people that come in and that don't request Southern or Northeastern, but they'll say, "What's your smallest?" And obviously, I think sometimes people's preferences are just based on like, what size of whatever they're comfortable with. So we have also started a couple years ago in our server lineups every day, just saying, this is what's our smallest, this is what's our largest, this is what are on the wood oven. Because like Bryan, like our list changes fairly frequently. So we just, if people ask them those types of questions, we like them to know automatically what is on the raw bar and what might satisfy someone from that perspective.
I love it. As an extension agent, hearing that education is key is amazing. So anything else you want to add? Because we got a good myth coming up that I love. That one's shattered. Do you see who's shucking that? How old are your kids?
That's the Grayson and the Baylands, so that's the Grayson Bay right there.
And they were at our Oyster South Shuck and Tell last year, shucking oysters up, and not only shucking oysters up, but they were teaching my Sea Grant agent how to shuck an oyster. So, for those people that say I can't shuck, and the reason why I'm talking about this is for home consumption. A lot of people that I have that when I'm like, hey, they're like, where can I buy oysters? And I go, oh, you can go straight to the farmer and buy the oyster. And they go, well, I don't know how to shuck an oyster. And I go, yet. You don't know how to shuck an oyster yet. And I believe that anybody can shuck. If Grayson and Balin can shuck, I think that a 30-year-old can shuck. I think a 40-year-old can shuck.
It's kind of like Ratatouille. Anybody can cook, right? So anybody can shuck.
Exactly. So we have a Shuckers here. Do you want to say anything quickly about the I Can't Shuck? I figured this one was just a quick one. You put the kids up there, you see 2 kids shucking an oyster. Everybody can shuck. You agree?
Safety first.
Safety first.
Safety protocol, and then get after it.
Yeah, I teach kids shucking classes all the time in New York. Yeah.
So there we go.
Anybody
We have
can
just
shuck.
busted that myth with a picture and 2 people. So I felt really bad because I don't know if you noticed, I've been shattering everything. I didn't want to do that to the kids. So I'm just going to package them up and shoot them off. So, well, that was, whoops, my bad. I was supposed to put a transition there. So we're supposed to have final thoughts here. It's supposed to be a blank page with final thoughts. I was going to give them each about five minutes to go over what they believe is the key in their industry, their side of the industry, to increase southern oyster consumption, not just here, but around the United States. So who would like to go first? Okay, Lindsay. And I'm going to step down so y'all can see her.
I think that education is huge, and I think that we need to invest in our shuckers because we are the storytellers that get the information to the guest. We are the last person they talk to about it, and the more that your shucker knows about your oyster, the more they can sell it, just like any sales rep.
Guess we're just going down the line. Yeah, so expanding your market as well. Like we have the catering, but I also partner with several other caterers that also go out and expand and show people new things, right? We were at Proof Brewing Company last week in Tallahassee. We were shucking with 17, 18 other oyster farmers from Florida. There were a lot of people there who were oyster aficionados, but there were several people there that were just tagging along and not really oyster eaters. So having options like baked oysters or cooked oysters for those people, and it makes it easier for them to transition into it. Also having smaller oysters available for people who are trying for the first time. But, you know, like last night, I had a friend of mine who was catering at a country music event yesterday in South Florida. And he was down there for another friend of his in the band, but the lead singer had never had an oyster before. So I asked him how the oysters went last night. He said they went fantastic, and now you have a new person who's hooked on oysters. So it's those type of things, you know, like Lindsay said, it really is about the story. And then, you know, getting the trust of people, you know, and for the restaurants and the caterers, you trust the source, you know. So you as a farmer, you have to gain that trust. You have to keep that trust. And so, you know, it's important to do that to make people feel safe.
I want to add something about what he said about that rock star. If you don't follow him on Instagram, there's a funny video. There's a guy playing a guitar, and he walks off stage, and you see the guy shuck an oyster, throwing it in his mouth, and he's chewing it, going back, playing guitar. So it was good. All right.
So yeah, I own a farm and a restaurant, so I have the just incredible luxury of never truly having to pay for an oyster. That's not the case for the general public, and I think that something that we need to campaign strongly for is at-home consumption. I think that oyster accessibility, especially in the Gulf Coast, just for the general public, it's tricky. It almost doesn't even exist. There's not really anywhere. I mean, Atlanta has 6 million people in it. There's really nowhere to go to buy high quality farmed oysters. I mean, you can go down to the DeKalb Farmers Market and get some wild stuff, and that's great. Support those industries. But at the same time, we've got a bunch of people over in here that all need more markets. They all need more sales. We're all suffering from having inventory that we can't push, you know, at the time that we need to. So something that, you know, I always try to wrap my mind around it, and I know that Jody's going to give me shit about it, but we do have to, as an industry, find out a way to get our product into more places. And as much as I love JT and as much as I love Evans Meats, they can't sell all the oysters that I grow. And it's possible even having a secondary or a third distributor means that you're going to have inventory that you have to get rid of. So I think that if we as a community and as an industry want to see the increased consumption of southern oysters, we have to make them accessible to people, because I don't know how many people out there can afford a $50 appetizer more than a couple times a year, but You know, it's not everybody. Most people can't do that. So if someone has the opportunity to buy a sack of oysters or even a half sack for the same cost that it was going to take to buy for them to buy 12 in a restaurant, then I think we have to foster those desires and figure out ways to get them in front of people. We have a lot of logistical challenges that are related to this accessibility, but it's definitely a box that we got to try to get out of because, you know, like I said, I think that's something that's just an ongoing struggle for any farmer is, you know, finding buyers.
Yeah, home consumption to me is, I think, the key. And the one thing that I've always found is, like I said, everybody says I can't shuck. Go on YouTube. How many people go on YouTube? I mean, you go on Google. It's easy to figure it out. And then the cool thing about when you go at home consumption that a lot of people don't realize is that you can kind of be like a scientist in there. So like you could be like, okay, well, let me put a little lime juice in that. Okay, I didn't like that combination. Okay, let me do a grapefruit mignonette. Okay, you know, that's how I invented some of my like random mignonettes, and the black garlic butter that I made was just, I was like, good, black garlic butter. It's incredible that I was just able to do that and make it. Can't do that when you go to a restaurant because you have something already prefixed, ready for you to go. So at home, you could just do whatever you want. So.
Can't be afraid of a little blood too.
Exactly. Well, I am a little afraid of blood, but
You know, you learn from cuts.
yes, you do. All right, Rutvik, what you got for us?
Ever heard of the Court of Sommeliers? The wine industry standardized processes and the way stuff should be served and set out a bunch of specialist sales reps to sell wine, essentially. I think this industry needs that. I think we are in the right time to make that happen. Organizations like the Oyster Master Guild are doing the right thing in that direction. I think Oyster South also should be involved in that. People like me, Lindsay, Andy, Libby, a bunch of others here who work tirelessly every day talking to people, selling oysters. We are the front-facing. I think giving us the resources and investing in this side of the industry will benefit. For the last 2 days, we've heard people talking about how to get oysters out there, marketing, sales. That's the last thing I heard. Who are your salespeople? Who are the people talking about oysters every single day? Us. Invest in us. Give us the resources. Figure it out. I don't know how, but it's us. So we will sell your oysters.
Yeah, that's a great point. We had a Know Thy Oyster program with Oyster South, and the program was going into restaurants, and we were training the wait staff. And you know, it's really kind of hard to do. In my area, it was a little hard to do because when you go to a chef, he would say, "Hey, you have 10 minutes," and you really can't tell the story of oysters in 10 minutes. And so that is something that I am still trying to figure out to do better, is to get shuckers, and not just shuckers, but also the servers, because it's telling a story about that oyster makes you want to eat that oyster, I think, a little bit better than saying, hey, this is a oyster from Pensacola Bay. Okay, what's so great about that? You know, you say, hey, this is an oyster grown in Panacea by the owner of Kimball House, and he takes meticulous care of his oysters so that when you put them on the menu, it's a perfect little morsel for you to taste. I mean, if you told me that when I was saying, hey, what oyster should I eat? I'd say, I want that one right there. So that's really what it is having a great sales rep, which just so happens to be the person that puts it in front of you. So.
Can I also add, it's also like picking oysters. Like if the shucker is educated and knows everything, like we were just talking about seasonal stuff, right? If your shucker is allowed to tell the chef, hey, these are the oysters in season, this is working right now, maybe they'll listen and order accordingly and not go for the 40-cent oyster, and maybe figure out a way to order something better and have it served better just by listening to us. So, yeah.
My thoughts are kind of all over the place, but I do want to, I want to finish with more culinary perspective because I think that's why you have me here. But to start, I will say we've been to probably 4 or 5 different restaurants since we've been here, and there hasn't been one so far that has really sold us a Texas oyster. They're on the list or whatever, but they may go so far as to try and push the New England oysters, I think, because they're less familiar with that product. And, you know, Texas oysters have not been around restaurants, especially high-end raw bar restaurants, for very long. So it's pretty understandable, and I think there's a huge amount of promise there if you just look at what Oyster South has achieved in the last, 15 years, what the Southern oyster industry has done and how far it's grown. So I think this is just the beginning, and I think there are, I love to shuck oysters at my restaurant because I love getting in front of the customers and talking to them about the oysters, about myself, about the restaurant. But I think in a lot of cases, when you're not on menus yet, like Blake, who we met the other day, whose oysters are just coming to market for the first time, you really have to be your own rep. And so start with the Houston area and go into places like Clark's and say, hey, would you let me do a lineup with your servers one day? I would love to shuck some oysters and have them taste them and tell my story. Because I think what it really said to me going to these restaurants the last couple of days is the restaurant owners might not all really be talking to them about it, and all Bryan and I do is talk to our staff about it because we're oyster bars, and that's our whole pitch is for people to come in and have that experience. But at just a restaurant that might have one or two on the menu, it's just not, I don't think it's a priority for them to educate in that way. But I think that it's just the beginning for Texas, and there's so much room for growth there. And then the other thing, so don't be afraid to be your own rep and to hit the road. I mean, come to Nashville anytime. We were just talking about this with Oyster South, with the board, that we would love to see you guys coming in and shucking at our restaurants. I've had Shiny Dimes, Hama Hama, Island Creek, Pelican, just come in and shuck with us, and we feature their oyster, and we send them around to tables to run food, to talk to people, and then the next time people come in, they ask for that product. So it's a great way to just get yourself out there. And the other thing I was going to say, just from more of a cooking standpoint, is obviously Henrietta Red in Nashville is primarily a seafood restaurant, and so we find ways to incorporate oysters in a lot of things. We have the raw bar. We always have two flavors of wood-fired oysters on the oven. We'll sometimes do more of a conserva or a smoked product. Sometimes we cure them and then dry them, and we'll shave them on top of pasta like a botarga. We put them in oyster stew. We'll do return to life cocktail, which is one of my favorite dishes. And so there's a lot of ways we can incorporate it at a seafood restaurant. And then my other restaurant is even more landlocked. It's 90 minutes south on top of a mountain in the middle of rural Tennessee. And so we only have one oyster on at any given time. And, of course we have clientele coming in from Nashville, Atlanta. It's kind of a destination restaurant. So it's not like we're always serving a rural population, but people come in and they buy those by the half dozen. We go through them, we still, it's not a seafood restaurant, and we'll still go through 500 a week. So, and I think in that instance, it's even more important to have something that really tastes great and we can really stand behind. So we tend to buy a lot of the same kind, but I think getting into these restaurants, talking about yourself, talking about these applications, and if you can't reach them all, going back to the conversation yesterday, utilizing social media as a tool to get your face out there, to get recipes out there. And then the last point on shucking, I think, is that we train staff all the time. Right now I have a 17-year-old dishwasher from Cowan, Tennessee, who had probably never eaten at a restaurant like mine before he started working in it. And a couple weeks ago, we were short on garde manger staff, so we had him start working over there. And all it takes is a really dedicated supervisor to teach someone how to shuck in their restaurant properly. And so it's something that we really focus on, really take a lot of pride in, because as we all know, if you're eating something that's really beat up, you're not having the same experience eating that oyster. And so I would also encourage people to keep an eye on who's serving your product And once again, like if you're seeing it served in a way that isn't showcasing it the best way, just feel free to offer a helping hand and say, hey, we really love having our oysters with you guys. Could we maybe come in and work with your shuckers one day? Because not everybody has the level of, I don't even think it's respect for product. Sometimes it's just what you don't know, you don't know. And I can certainly say that was true about myself only 10 to 15 years ago. So, yeah.
Well, that was perfect, because I actually had a question about training shuckers and servers. But one thing I do want to ask you that I just thought about, how do you deal with turnover with the training?
Yeah, I mean, we are, I think our restaurant, we don't have a ton of turnover, but our restaurant is just like any other, where like 70% of your cooks are there for 2 or 3 years, and the other 30% turns over every 6 months, right? So you do have to train people, not just because they turn over, but because they also move up. Maybe they move from shucking to making salads or working on the hotline. At Henrietta Red, we really see it as a strength that everybody in the back of house is trained to shuck, even our dishwashers. So at the busiest times, if we need somebody to jump in or be helpful, we can do that. And so we just, every time someone new comes in, we work with them for several days before we let them just run wild. And we're not afraid to push back. I mean, if any of y'all have ever been a manager before, you know sometimes it's hard to say, hey, that doesn't look good. We need to, let's start over, because you might be losing product, you might be offending somebody. But if ultimately you want to reduce the amount of oysters you're losing, you have to do that. I had one more point. Oh, which is that at Bryan's restaurant, a lot of the front of house managers, or at least the owners, can also shuck, which I hold over my managers' heads all the time. Like, you guys got to learn, because everybody's always talking about back of house labor costs, and it's like, well, I don't know. You just get in there every once in a while and relieve us for 30 minutes. That's a whole body we can move away from. So,
Those guys being able to shuck, though, does not mean that Hannah is here. She's our main shucker now. And the fact that she is here means that we are probably going home to a full-blown shit show.
Thanks for being here, Hannah.
Brandon had one more thing he wanted to say.
Yeah, just a couple more things I wanted to reiterate here. Brian's completely correct that at-home consumption needs to increase. That is, you can only push so many oysters to a distributor. They have a full list of other oyster farms that they provide to restaurants. And restaurants can only push so many oysters. That there is a limitation there. So at-home consumption, that is a big one. It's tough. I mean, us oyster farmers here, you're going to have to figure out how to get those in people's hands at home. You're going to need to figure out how to ship. It's not fun, but it is necessary. And then also just about the sick thing. Vibrio is killed when it's cooked. So cooking oysters, you can bake them, you can grill them, you can do all kinds of things with them. And so if there's somebody who's scared about eating raw oysters in those summer months, you can definitely eat cooked oysters.
I think Rutvik, did you have something?
I'm just glad Hannah's here.
I just wanted to add on quickly, if I may, in regards to what Brandon was just saying. If anybody has ever tried to use a shipping service, you know that there is a significant amount of risk in that.
Huge.
So I don't know, maybe not this year. Maybe we can get Justin Stang to do a breakout session on how to negotiate a good FedEx rate.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I would say that, and then you can use there's some temperature strips that are really inexpensive that you keep in the freezer. You break them and you throw them in the box. And so if it gets below 50 degrees for 2 hours, that temperature, it shows that it's not safe.
Lindsay has
Distribution out of the Gulf South is also something we have to improve to increase oyster eating out of
I agree.
our market. So Brandon in Kansas City can't get Gulf oysters. He is begging for them from his reps and cannot get them. Same issue for New York right here. There are people that want them and they want to shuck them and present them to people and they can't get them and they're asking for them. So how do we fix that as an industry?
Same. I'm having to ship oysters to Rhode Island next week.
Evans Meats and Seafood Shipping Company.
Yeah.
Where you at? Where you at? We're looking at you. Brandon.
Patrick, where are you? You're gonna get hammered.
Yep.
There he is. He's about to get hammered. All right. Anybody else? I might ask if anybody has one question. I think we have time for maybe like one question, 2 questions maybe if they're
One.
quick.
One, hello.
Yeah. What you got?
I know everybody always wants to sell more and that we all need to create more revenue, especially as farmers try to make this a viable livelihood. But for a little perspective is y'all are all doing an incredible job. 10 years ago, we didn't have anywhere near this sort of supply of super premium, high quality oysters coming out of the Gulf. And so this is just going to take a little bit of time for the markets to mature in the middle of the country, in the Northeast and the Northwest, but it's going to come. And the reason it's going to come is that the quality of the oysters coming out of these regions, the Southern Atlantic, out of the Gulf, is absolutely freaking incredible. So give it a little time, stay patient with it, keep doing what you're doing, improve your processes, but no, it's going to happen, I promise you that.
So these are some of the last little questions that I wanted everybody in the audience to think about. So just as something that you can walk away from this, like what can we do? So this is just something, hey, just to think about what can y'all do as an industry to increase Southern oyster consumption, not in the next year, but let's just look, like he said, the next decade. Let's see how we can increase oyster consumption in the next decade. I want to thank my panelists for coming. I know we're running out of time. If you know them, you can come up to them and ask them as many questions as you want. I'm letting you do that. They're probably mad at me for saying that, but just go bother them. Also, that is my QR code for all my information. If you want to scan that, you can. If you want to get a hold of any of the panelists, you can just contact me, and I can give you all their contact information. Also, this is a little card, so you can share your information with me as well. It just helps me keep up. I'm not really good with business cards, so that's my business card. Thank you all so much for listening. I really hope you guys go out and go eat some Southern oysters. Tonight is the Shuck and Tell, which is an amazing event where we'll have 12 different farmers from around the southern United States shucking up their oysters, and it's a great time to try them out and see which one's your favorite. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Shuck and Deal.